The dark space around Earth's solar system suddenly filled with ships. These were not human ships. They moved without sound, their black metal hulls drinking in the light of distant stars. The ships belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, and they had come to study Earth. Commander Vexhai stood on the bridge of the largest ship. His pale blue skin gleamed under the soft lights. His 4 arms moved across control panels with practiced ease. 2 large black eyes studied the screens showing the third planet from the sun. Earth looked peaceful from this distance. Blue oceans, white clouds, and green continents spun slowly in the darkness. Another primitive world, Vexhai said to his crew. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had done this 47 times before. The inhabitants call it Earth. They call themselves humans. Scout Captain Zilkith approached with a data tablet in her lower arms. Her silver uniform bore the marks of many successful missions. She had been with Vexhai for 20 years, watching worlds fall to their empire. "Sir, our first scans show a divided species," she reported. "They fight among themselves constantly. Their technology is crude. Most still use chemical explosives for weapons. They have not even left their own solar system." Vexhai nodded. This was the same story they had heard on dozens of worlds. A young species, still trapped on their home planet, still fighting over resources and territory. It made conquest easy. "How many of them are there?" he asked. "About 8 billion, Zilkith replied. "But they are spread across the entire planet. No single government controls more than a small portion of the surface." "Perfect," Vexhai said. "A divided enemy is a weak enemy." "What about their military strength?" Zilkith touched her tablet, bringing up new data. "Primitive aircraft, ground vehicles, and sea vessels. They launch crude rockets into space, but barely reach their own moon. Their most powerful weapons could damage our ships, but they would need to hit us first." The commander walked to the large window that showed Earth hanging in space like a blue marble. He had seen this view many times before, looking down at worlds that would soon belong to the Empire. Each conquest followed the same pattern. First, they would study the dominant species for several months. They would learn about their culture, their technology, and their weaknesses. Then the main invasion fleet would arrive and take the world in a matter of days. "Begin Phase 1, Vexhai ordered. "Deploy the observation drones. I want to know everything about these humans before we make our recommendation to the fleet." Zilkith saluted with all 4 arms. "Yes, sir." "How long do you want to observe them?" 6 weeks should be enough," the commander replied. "These primitive species are usually quite predictable. We will watch them, catalog their weaknesses, and then recommend a standard invasion protocol." The scout ship's drone bay opened silently. Dozens of small, invisible craft flew out toward Earth. Each drone was no larger than a human hand, but they carried sensors that could watch and record everything happening on the planet's surface. The humans would never know they were being studied. Dr. Kethmer, the fleet's chief scientist, monitored the drones from his laboratory. His 6 tentacles moved across multiple screens at once, processing data faster than any human mind could handle. The first images from Earth showed exactly what they expected to see. Humans walked through large cities, seemingly unaware of any danger. They gathered in groups, talking and laughing. Many of them appeared to be engaged in peaceful activities. They grew food, built structures, and cared for their young. They looked soft and weak compared to the warrior races the Zephyrians had conquered before. "Initial observations confirm our estimates," Dr. Kethmer reported to the bridge. "The human species appears to be primarily focused on commerce and social activities. They show little awareness of potential threats from space. Their defensive capabilities seem limited to conflicts with their own kind." Vexhai received the report with satisfaction. Another easy conquest for the Empire. The humans would probably surrender once they saw the size of the invasion fleet. Most primitive species did. Continue the observations, he ordered. Focus on their major population centers and military installations. I want to know where their leaders are and how they communicate with their forces. Over the next few days, the drones spread across Earth's continents. It watched humans in North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. The pattern was the same everywhere. Humans seemed to spend most of their time in peaceful pursuits. They worked at jobs, spent time with families, and engaged in various forms of entertainment. Their military forces looked impressive for a primitive species, but they were clearly designed to fight other humans, not an advanced alien civilization. The Zephyrians had energy weapons that could cut through any human armor. They had shields that could stop any human weapon. They had ships that could attack from orbit, beyond the reach of human defenses. This should be our easiest conquest. Yet, Zilkith commented as she reviewed the daily reports. These humans show no signs of being able to resist a determined attack. Vexhai agreed. He had already begun drafting his recommendation to the main fleet. Earth would be classified as a minimal threat world. The invasion could proceed with a standard force. No special preparations would be needed, but the commander was a careful leader. He had not survived 47 conquests by being overconfident. He decided to extend the observation period by another 2 weeks. It was better to be completely certain about his species before recommending invasion. Deploy additional drones to the wilderness areas, he ordered. I want to observe humans in their natural environment, away from their cities and technology. Sometimes a species shows different characteristics when they are alone. This decision would change everything. But for now, the Zephyrians continued their observations, confident that they were watching a weak and peaceful species that would soon bow before the might of their empire. The invasion fleet was already on its way. Expecting to find an easy victory waiting for them, Earth continued to spin peacefully in space, its inhabitants unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. The blue planet looked so calm and quiet from the dark ships watching it. But appearances, as the Zephyrians would soon learn, could be very deceiving. 3 weeks had passed since the Zephyrian drones began watching Earth. The aliens had seen humans in cities, working in offices, shopping in stores, and playing in parks. Everything confirmed their belief that humans were a peaceful, weak species. Drone 7 Alpha floated silently above the forests of Montana. This drone had been assigned to watch the wilderness areas, far from human cities. For days, it had recorded nothing but trees, animals, and empty mountains. The Zephyrians were starting to think this drone was wasting time. Then, on a cold morning in early autumn, the drone detected a human walking alone through the forest. Jake Murphy was 32 years old and worked as a park ranger. He knew these mountains better than anyone. Every trail, every stream, every dangerous cliff was marked in his memory. This morning, he was checking the northern section of the park, looking for damage from last week's storm. Jake carried a backpack with supplies, a radio, and a long wooden walking stick. He moved through the forest with confident steps, stopping occasionally to mark fallen trees or check trail markers. To the watching aliens, he looked like every other human they had observed. Average height, average build, wearing simple clothes, and carrying primitive tools. The drone followed Jake as he climbed higher into the mountains. Dr. Kethmer watched the feed from his laboratory, making notes about human behavior in natural environments. So far, this human seemed no different from the others they had studied. Subject appears to be conducting some form of maintenance activity, Dr. Kethmer recorded. No signs of enhanced physical capabilities or survival skills beyond the expected norm. But the mountains of Montana held surprises that the aliens could never have predicted. Jake was examining a damaged trail sign when he heard the sound. A deep, rumbling growl that made his blood run cold. He turned slowly, and there, 30 feet away, stood a massive grizzly bear. The bear was huge, even for its species. It weighed over 600 pounds and stood nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder. Its brown fur was thick and shaggy, and its small black eyes fixed on Jake with unmistakable hostility. The bear's lips pulled back, showing teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. On the Zephyrian ship, alarms began to sound. The drone's sensors detected the bear's approach, and the computer systems automatically began recording what they expected to be the quick death of the human subject. "Commander Vex High to the laboratory," came the voice over the intercom. "We have a predator encounter in progress." Dr. Kethmer enhanced the drone's recording capabilities. This would be valuable data about human responses to immediate mortal danger. The bear outweighed the human by at least 4 to 1. It had natural weapons and armor that the human completely lacked. The outcome seemed certain. Beginning death sequence recording, Dr. Kethmer announced to his staff. Expected duration, 30 seconds. But Jake Murphy did not run dot. Instead, he slowly reached for his walking stick and stepped sideways, putting his back to a large tree. His eyes never left the bear. He knew that running would only trigger the animal's chase instinct. His only chance was to make himself appear as large and threatening as possible. The bear rose up on its hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall. It roared, a sound that echoed through the mountains like thunder. The Zephyrian sensors detected that the human's heart rate had increased dramatically, and his body was producing massive amounts of chemical compounds they could not identify. What they were seeing was the human stress response system activating. Adrenaline flooded Jake's bloodstream, sharpening his senses and increasing his strength. His pupils dilated, his breathing quickened, and his muscles prepared for battle. The bear dropped back to all fours and charged. What happened next defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about humans. Jake did not try to escape. Instead, he stepped forward to meet the charging bear, swinging his walking stick like a club. The stick cracked against the bear's skull with tremendous force, but the animal barely slowed down. The bear's massive paw swiped at Jake, claws raking across his chest and sending him stumbling backward. Blood soaked through his shirt, but Jake did not fall. He grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the bear's face, striking it directly in the eye. The bear roared in pain and anger, shaking its massive head. Jake used this moment to position himself better, keeping the tree at his back and his makeshift weapons ready. On the Zephyrian ship, the bridge crew had gathered around Dr. Kethmer's screens. They watched in stunned silence as the human continued to fight the obviously superior predator. "This is impossible," Dr. Kethmer whispered. The human should have been killed in the first seconds of contact. But Jake was not only still alive, he was adapting his tactics. When the bear charged again, Jake rolled sideways and struck at its legs, trying to damage its mobility. The bear's claws caught his shoulder, tearing deep gashes, but Jake kept fighting. The battle continued for 20 minutes that felt like hours to both participants. Jake used every advantage he could find. He threw rocks at the bear's eyes, struck at its nose with his stick, and when the stick finally broke, he used the sharp end like a spear. The bear was bleeding from multiple wounds, but it was far from defeated. It was bigger, stronger, and had natural weapons that Jake could not match. But Jake had something the bear did not understand. Jake had intelligence, and he had something else that the watching aliens were only beginning to recognize. He had the absolute refusal to give up, even when facing certain death. When the bear knocked Jake to the ground, the aliens expected the fight to end. Instead, Jake rolled away from the killing blow and came up with another rock. When his makeshift spear was batted away, He used his bare hands to strike at the bear's sensitive nose. The bear's size and strength were overwhelming, but Jake fought with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his species' DNA. Every time he was knocked down, he got back up. Every time he was wounded, he found a new way to strike back. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the bear had enough. Bleeding and exhausted, it backed away from the human who had refused to die. With one final roar of frustration, the massive animal turned and disappeared into the forest. Jake Murphy stood alone in the clearing, covered in blood and breathing heavily. His clothes were torn, his body was covered in deep scratches, and he had several wounds that would need medical attention. But he was alive. The Zephyrian observers watched in complete silence as Jake calmly used his radio to call for medical assistance. He bandaged his worst wounds with supplies from his backpack, then continued his patrol as if fighting a 600-pound predator was just part of his job. "Replay the footage," Commander Vexhai ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Kethmer replayed the entire encounter. The bridge crew watched it again, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. By every law of physics and biology they knew, the human should have died quickly. Instead, he had fought a creature that outweighed him by hundreds of pounds and forced it to retreat. Analysis. Vexhai demanded. Dr. Kethmer's tentacles trembled as he checked his readings. "Sir, the human's body underwent chemical changes that our science cannot fully explain. His strength increased, his reflexes improved, and his pain tolerance reached levels that should not be possible for a species from a standard gravity world." The commander stared at the screen, showing Jake Murphy walking away from the battlefield. How many other humans might be capable of this? It was a question that would haunt the Zephyrians for the rest of their mission. They had been watching humans in their peaceful, civilized state, but what they had just witnessed suggested that beneath that peaceful exterior lay something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The command center of the Zephyrian flagship fell into chaos after Jake Murphy's encounter with the grizzly bear. Officers who had conquered 47 worlds stood frozen, staring at screens that showed footage they could not believe. "Commander." Vexhai called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The ship's main conference room filled with the Empire's best military minds and scientists. They had seen the impossible, and now they needed to understand it. "Play the footage again." Vexhai ordered. Dr. Kethmer activated the holographic display. The entire fight played out in 3 dimensions above the conference table. Every detail was captured in perfect clarity. The bear's massive size, its natural weapons, its overwhelming physical advantages, and the human, small and soft, fighting back with nothing but primitive tools and raw determination. Captain Zilkith watched the footage for the 5th time, her 4 arms crossed in disbelief. "Sir, this cannot be accurate. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. I ran complete diagnostics on Drone 7 Alpha," Dr. Kethmer replied. "All systems are functioning perfectly. What we are seeing actually happened." Military analyst Curvaith stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. He had planned the conquest of 17 worlds, and he understood combat better than anyone in the fleet. "Commander, I have studied this footage frame by frame. By every tactical principle we know, this human should have died in the first 30 seconds. Then explain to me how he survived 20 minutes. Vexhai demanded. Curvaith activated his own display, showing detailed measurements of the encounter. "Sir, the bear possessed every conceivable advantage. It was 4 times heavier than the human. Its claws were natural weapons, capable of tearing through armor. Its teeth could crush bone. Its thick hide could stop most projectiles." He paused. The footage at the moment, Jake first struck the bear with his walking stick. But watch this. The human's first action was not to flee or seek help. He immediately began fighting back. And look at his body language. He is not acting out of panic or fear. He is calculating, adapting, planning his next move even while being attacked. Dr. Kefmer pulled up his biological analysis. The chemical changes in the human's body during the encounter were extraordinary. His adrenaline levels increased by over 500%. His heart rate reached levels that should have caused cardiac failure. His muscle strength increased by at least 30%. Most remarkable of all, his pain sensitivity decreased dramatically, allowing him to continue fighting despite severe injuries. Chief Psychologist Methara had been silent during the meeting, but now she spoke up. What disturbs me most is not the physical changes, but the mental ones. This human never showed signs of giving up. Even when knocked to the ground, even when, bleeding from multiple wounds, he continued to seek new ways to attack. That level of determination suggests something fundamental about their species that we have missed. Vexhai studied the faces of his senior staff. These were beings who had conquered nearly 50 worlds. They had seen every type of species the galaxy had to offer. Warrior races, hive minds, technologically advanced civilizations, primitive, tribal societies. But none of them had ever seen anything like Jake Murphy's fight with the bear. Could this human be an exception? Vexhai asked. Perhaps their military forces have enhanced soldiers, but the general population remains weak? Dr. Kethmer shook his head. Our scans of this individual before the encounter showed nothing unusual. Average height, average weight, no cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications. According to our data, Jake Murphy is a completely typical human male. The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air. If Jake Murphy was typical, then what did that say about the rest of the human species? We need more data, Vexhai decided. Dr. Kethmer, I want you to analyze every second of that footage. Find out how that human's body was able to do what it did. Captain Zilkith, redirect our drones to focus on humans in stressful or dangerous situations. If this is normal behavior for their species, we need to know. Over the next several days, the Zephyrian scientists worked around the clock to understand what they had witnessed. Dr. Kethmer ran the footage through every analytical program in their database. He measured force vectors, calculated impact, damage, and analyzed the biochemical changes in Jake's body. The results were disturbing. Jake Murphy had fought with the efficiency of a trained warrior, despite having no military background. His tactical decisions during the fight showed an instinctive understanding of combat that rivaled Zephyrian special forces. Most shocking of all, his body had undergone transformations that their medical science said should not be possible. Commander, Dr. Kethmer reported, I have completed my analysis. This human's body contains biological systems that we did not detect in our initial scans. When faced with mortal danger, humans appear to have emergency protocols that fundamentally alter their physical capabilities. What kind of protocols? Vexhai asked. Their adrenal system floods their bloodstream with combat stimulants. Their nervous system increases reaction speed and pain tolerance. Their muscular system can temporarily operate at levels far beyond normal capacity. It is as if their entire species has been designed for survival in extremely hostile environments. Captain. Zilkith entered the laboratory with new reports from the redirected drones. Her expression was grim. Sir, we have been observing humans in various stressful situations. The results are concerning. She activated a new set of recordings. This is a human female named Sarah Collins. She works in what they call a hospital, treating injured humans. We observed her working for 18 consecutive hours without rest, making life and death decisions while under extreme pressure. The footage showed Sarah moving through the hospital with calm efficiency, treating patients who were dying or severely injured. Her hands never shook, her voice never wavered, and she never showed signs of breaking down despite the enormous stress. "This is Pete Rodriguez," Zilkith continued, showing new footage. "He constructs tall buildings in dangerous conditions, working hundreds of feet above the ground. Watch his reaction when his safety equipment fails." The recording showed Pete calmly securing himself with backup equipment while hanging from a steel beam 40 stories above the street. He showed no panic, no fear, just practical problem-solving in a situation that would have terrified most. Zephyrian soldiers. "And this is Amy Carter," Zilkith added. "She works 3 different jobs while caring for 2 offspring and an elderly parent. She sleeps 4 hours per night and has maintained this schedule for over 2 years." A footage showed Amy moving through her daily routine with mechanical precision, working at a restaurant, then at a store, then at an office, then home to care for her family. She never complained, never broke down, never showed any sign that this crushing workload was beyond her capabilities. Vexhai stared at the recordings in growing alarm. These are not soldiers. These are not their elite warriors. These are ordinary civilians. "Yes, sir," Zilkith confirmed. "And they all demonstrate capabilities that exceed what we thought possible for their species." Dr. Kethmer pulled up comparative data from other worlds they had conquered. "Commander, I have analyzed the survival capabilities of 47 different species. Humans exceed every single one of them in terms of endurance, adaptability, and stress tolerance." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Zephyrians had been observing humans during their peaceful, relaxed state. They had mistaken civilization for weakness. But underneath that civilized exterior was a species that had been forged by millions of years of surviving on one of the galaxy's most dangerous planets. What about their military forces? Vexhai asked quietly. Zilkith hesitated before answering. "Sir, if their civilians can perform at these levels, I am afraid to think about what their trained warriors might be capable of." The commander walked to the window overlooking Earth. The blue planet still looked peaceful and inviting. But now he understood that appearances could be deceiving. They had come to study what they thought was a weak, primitive species. Instead, they had discovered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival and warfare. "Continue the observations," Vexhai ordered, "but change our classification of this species from minimal threat to unknown threat level. I want to know exactly what we are dealing with before the invasion fleet arrives." But deep in his heart, Commander Vexhai was beginning to suspect that they had made a terrible mistake. The human who fought the bear was not an exception. He was an example of what the entire species might be capable when pushed to their limits, and the Zephyrian invasion fleet was going to push them very hard indeed. Commander Vexhai could not sleep. For 3 days, he had been studying the reports from his expanded surveillance operation. Each new piece of data about humanity made him more uncomfortable about the approaching invasion. The command center buzzed with activity as his team worked around the clock to understand what they were truly facing. Dr. Kethmer had assembled a team of specialists to analyze human behavior in extreme situations. What they found challenged every assumption the Zephyrian Empire had made about Earth's dominant species. "Commander, we have compiled data on human performance under stress," Dr. Kethmer reported. "The results are unlike anything in our databases." Captain Zilkith joined them at the main display. "Sir, we focused on 3 categories: civilian emergency response, hazardous occupations, and military personnel. Each category has revealed capabilities that exceed our previous estimates." The first recording showed Lisa Brooks, a trauma surgeon, in Detroit. The drone had followed her during a mass casualty event when multiple vehicles crashed on a busy highway. Lisa worked for 12 straight hours, performing complex operations on dozens of patients. "Observe her precision," Dr. Kethmer pointed out. "Her hands remain steady even after hours of continuous work. Her decision-making speed increases rather than decreases as the situation becomes more critical. Most remarkable, her stress response actually improves her performance. The footage showed Lisa moving between operating tables, making split-second decisions about who to save first. Her voice remained calm as she directed teams of medical staff. Even when faced with injuries that seemed impossible to treat, she never hesitated, never showed doubt. "This is not exceptional behavior for their medical personnel," Zilkith added. "We have observed similar performance from hundreds of human doctors and nurses. They routinely work in conditions that would break the mental health of most Zephyrian citizens." The next recording showed a different type of human capability. Tony Williams was a member of their military's elite forces, what humans called Navy SEALs. The drone had captured him during a training exercise that was designed to push human endurance to its absolute limits. "Watch this carefully," Dr. Kethmer said as the footage began. "This human has been awake for 72 hours straight. He has run over 50 miles while carrying heavy equipment. He has been cold, wet, and underfed for 3 days." The recording showed Tony crawling through mud under barbed wire, his body exhausted beyond what should have been possible. But his eyes remained alert, his movements remained precise, and when the exercise required him to solve complex problems, his mental performance had actually improved under the extreme stress. "How is this possible?" demanded military analyst Curveth. "Our elite soldiers would have collapsed after half that punishment." Dr. Kethmer displayed his biochemical analysis. "Their bodies produce a cocktail of natural stimulants that we have never encountered. Under extreme stress, humans become faster, stronger, and more intelligent rather than weaker. It is as if their entire species has been designed for warfare." But the most disturbing footage came from their observations of human civilians in survival situations. The drones had recorded several humans who became lost in wilderness areas, cut off from their technology and civilization. The recording showed Mike Chun, a businessman whose small aircraft had crashed in the Alaskan wilderness. Mike had no survival training, no military background, and no special equipment. He should have died within days. Instead, Mike had survived for 3 weeks in conditions that would have killed most alien species within hours. He built shelter from tree branches and moss. He started fires using primitive methods. He caught fish with improvised tools and found edible plants by trial and error. "Most remarkable," Dr. Kethmer continued, "is his psychological state. After 3 weeks alone in hostile conditions, with no hope of rescue, this human remained mentally stable. He did not break down or give up. He continued to improve his situation and plan for long-term survival." Captain Zilkith activated another recording. "This is Rachel Stone, a teacher who became trapped in a collapsed building during an earthquake. She was buried under debris for 5 days with no food or water." The footage from rescue cameras showed Rachel conscious and alert when they finally reached her. She had used the time to organize other survivors, treat injuries with improvised medical supplies, and maintain morale among people who thought they were going to die. 5 days without food or water should have resulted in delirium and death, Dr. Kethmer explained. Instead, this human remained functional and even helped others survive. Her psychological resilience is beyond our ability to measure. The reports continued for hours. Construction workers who built skyscrapers in conditions that would terrify. Zephyrian engineers. Firefighters who ran into burning buildings to save others. Police officers who faced armed criminals with nothing but primitive weapons and training. But it was the military footage that truly frightened the alien observers. Drones had captured extensive recordings of human soldiers in combat situations. These were not the primitive warriors they had expected to find. These were highly trained, experienced fighters who had spent years preparing for warfare. "This is Sergeant Matt Davis," Zilkith announced, showing footage of urban combat training. "He can accurately hit targets at distances that exceed the range of our standard weapons. He can move through hostile territory for days without being detected. Most importantly, he has been trained to think tactically under extreme pressure." The recording showed Matt leading a squad through a mock battle scenario. Even though it was just training, his level of focus and tactical awareness was remarkable. He anticipated enemy movements, adapted to changing situations, and made complex decisions while under simulated fire. "How many soldiers like this do they have?" Vex High asked quietly. "Millions," Zilkith replied. "And that is just their active military forces. We estimate that they have trained tens of millions of additional soldiers who could be called to duty if needed." Dr. Kethmer pulled up a global analysis. "Commander, we have made a fundamental error in our assessment of this species. We observed them during peacetime and assumed this represented their maximum capabilities. But humans appear to have vast reserves of potential that only emerge under pressure." The chief psychologist, Meth Ara, had been studying the psychological profiles of observed humans. Her report was the most disturbing of all. "Commander, I have analyzed the mental patterns of over 10,000 human subjects. What I have found suggests that their entire species has been shaped by constant exposure to mortal danger." She activated a display showing human brain scans during stressful situations. "Their neural patterns show adaptations that we have never seen before. When faced with threats, their brains do not shut down or become confused. Instead, they become more focused, more creative, and more determined. What kind of evolutionary pressure creates this?" Vexhai asked. "The worst kind," Methara replied. "Their planet has subjected them to ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive floods, deadly diseases, and predators that make our footage of the bear encounter seem routine. For millions of years, only the humans who could adapt, survive, and fight back were able to pass on their genes. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrians had assumed that Earth was a peaceful garden world that had produced a soft, easy species to conquer. Instead, Earth was a death world that had forged its inhabitants into the most resilient survivors the galaxy had ever produced. "Sir," Captain Zilkith said quietly, "I recommend we reconsider our invasion plans." Vexhai stared at the recordings of human military exercises. Soldiers who could fight for days without rest. Weapons that could strike targets beyond visual range. Tactics that had been refined through centuries of constant warfare against their own species. "How long until the main invasion fleet arrives?" he asked. 4 weeks, Zilkith replied. "Continue the observations," Mexhai ordered. "Focus specifically on their military capabilities. I need to know exactly what we would be facing if we proceed with the invasion." But in his heart, Commander Vexhai was beginning to understand that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had come to conquer what they thought was a primitive, peaceful species. Instead, they had found a race of natural-born warriors who had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for exactly this kind of fight. The question was no longer whether the Zephyrians could conquer humanity. The question was whether humanity would let them leave alive once the shooting started. And based on everything he had seen, Vexhai was not optimistic about their chances of survival if they chose to fight these remarkable and terrifying creatures called humans. The emergency council meeting was called at 0300 hours, ship time. Commander Vexhai had not slept in 2 days, and it showed in his pale blue face and tired eyes. Around the conference table sat the senior staff of the Zephyrian scout fleet, all of them looking equally exhausted and troubled. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the approaching invasion fleet. Hundreds of massive warships carrying millions of soldiers, all heading toward Earth based on the preliminary reports that classified humans as a minimal threat species. "We have a problem," Vexai announced without ceremony. "A very big problem." Dr. Kethmer activated his final analysis report. The data that filled the screens around the room represented 6 weeks of intensive study of humanity. Charts, graphs, combat footage, biological scans, and psychological profiles painted a picture that none of them wanted to believe. "Based on our extended observations," Dr. Kethmer began, "I must formally recommend that we reclassify the human species from minimal threat to extinction-level threat for any invasion force." The silence that followed was deafening. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever been classified as an extinction-level threat to the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Zilkith was the first to speak. "Doctor, please explain your reasoning." Dr. Kethmer activated the first series of recordings. "We initially observed humans in their peaceful, civilian state and mistook this for their maximum capability. We now understand that we were observing a warrior species in its resting phase." The footage showed scenes from human history that the drones had recorded from their museums and educational programs. Humans fighting through ice ages that lasted for thousands of years. Humans surviving. Volcanic eruptions that covered entire continents in ash. Humans rebuilding their civilizations after plagues that killed half their population. "Their planet is what we would classify as a Class 12 death world," Dr. Kethmer continued. "Ice ages, supravolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, global floods, and mass extinctions have repeatedly tried to wipe out life on Earth. Each time, humans not only survived, but became stronger." Military analyst Kurveth leaned forward. "What are their actual combat capabilities?" Dr. Kethmer switched to military footage. "We observed their special forces conducting training exercises. Commander, these humans routinely perform feats that exceed the physical capabilities of our elite soldiers. They can march for days without rest, fight in conditions that would kill most species, and adapt to new threats faster than our computers can process data." The recording showed human soldiers moving through a simulated battlefield. They used tactics that were both primitive and brilliant, combining advanced technology with close-quarters combat skills that had been refined over millennia of warfare. "But sir," Captain Zilkith interrupted, "surely our superior technology gives us an advantage? Our energy weapons, our shields, our starships?" Dr. Kethmer shook his head grimly. "We analyzed the response to technological threats. Humans have spent their entire history fighting enemies with superior capabilities. David versus Goliath is not just a story to them. It is their standard operating procedure." He showed footage of human military history. Smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior tactics. Primitive weapons being used to destroy advanced technology. Humans turning their enemies' strengths against them with devastating effectiveness. "They do not simply adapt to new threats," Dr. Kethmer explained. "They actively seek out ways to defeat enemies who should be able to crush them. It is as if their entire species has been designed specifically to fight wars they cannot win." Chief Psychologist Methara activated her psychological analysis. "Commander, the mental profiles are even more disturbing than the physical capabilities. Humans possess something that we have never encountered in any other species: the absolute refusal to accept defeat." She showed brain scans taken during the bear fight and other extreme situations. When faced with impossible odds, human brain chemistry does not trigger surrender responses. Instead, it triggers what they call berserker rage, a mental state where they become more dangerous as they become more desperate. "Explain," Vexai demanded. "A cornered human does not become weaker or more frightened," Nethara replied. "They become exponentially more dangerous. The closer they come to death, the more willing they are to take their enemies with them. It is a psychological adaptation that makes them nearly impossible to defeat through intimidation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 worlds primarily through the threat of overwhelming force. Most species surrendered once they realized they could not win. But humans, apparently, would fight even harder once they realized they were outgunned. What about their technology? Curvif asked. Surely we still have significant advantages. There, Dr. Kethmer brought up technical specifications. Their current technology is indeed primitive compared to ours. But they have something more dangerous than advanced weapons. They have the ability to innovate under pressure. We observed their research facilities and defense industries. When faced with a new threat, they can develop countermeasures faster than any species we have encountered. He showed footage of human scientists and engineers working on military projects. They do not simply build weapons, Commander. They build weapon systems that can adapt and evolve during combat. Their military doctrine assumes that their enemies will have superior technology, so they design their equipment to level the playing field through cleverness rather than raw power. Captain Zilkith reviewed the strategic implications. Sir, even if we could defeat their current military forces, the cost would be enormous. And that assumes they do not develop new weapons during the fighting. There is worse news, Dr. Kethmer continued. We analyzed their response to existential threats. When humans believe their species is in danger, they do not simply fight harder. They fundamentally change their entire civilization to focus on warfare. The footage showed human societies during their major wars. Entire populations mobilizing for combat. Civilians becoming soldiers. Factories converting from peaceful production to weapons manufacturing almost overnight. In their largest conflicts, they transformed their entire planet into a war machine within months, Dr. Kethmer explained. Every human became a combatant. Every resource was directed toward defeating their enemies. They have the organizational capability to turn their entire species into a single focused military force. Vex-High stared at the data with growing horror. How many humans are there? 8 billion, Zilkith replied quietly. And how many soldiers could they field if they mobilized their entire population? Dr. Kethmer consulted his calculations. Based on their historical patterns, approximately 6 billion combat-capable humans could be armed and ready for battle within 90 days of the start of hostilities. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire Zephyrian invasion fleet carried only 50 million soldiers. Even if each Zephyrian could defeat 100 humans in single combat, they would still be outnumbered by more than 10 to 1. There is one more thing, Dr. Kethmer said quietly. We need to discuss the Jake Murphy incident. The room tensed. Everyone had seen the footage of the park ranger fighting the grizzly bear, but none of them fully understood its implications. Jake Murphy is not a soldier, Dr. Kethmer explained. He is not enhanced, not trained for combat, not equipped with advanced weapons. He is what humans would consider an ordinary civilian. Yet he fought a 600-pound predator to a standstill, using nothing but improvised weapons and raw determination. He paused, letting that fact sink in. If their ordinary civilians can do this, what are their trained warriors capable of? Commander Vex-High stood up slowly. He walked to the window that showed Earth hanging peacefully in space. The blue planet looked so calm, so inviting. It was hard to believe that it was home to the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. Recommendations? He asked. Immediate withdrawal, Dr. Kethmer replied without hesitation. We should classify Earth as a forbidden zone and never return. Agreed, said Captain Zilkith. An invasion would not be a conquest. It would be mutual. Extinction. But what about the main fleet? Curvif asked. They are expecting to find an easy target. Vex-High made his decision. Send an emergency message to Fleet Command. Tell them that Earth is to be reclassified as a class of death world, inhabited by an apex predator species. The invasion is cancelled indefinitely. He turned back to his staff. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. We leave Earth's solar system within the hour. What reason do we give in our official report? Zilkith asked. Vex High thought about. Jake Murphy standing over a defeated grizzly bear, calmly calling for medical assistance, as if fighting monsters was just part of his daily routine. Tell them the truth, he said finally. We discovered a species that fights bears for survival and considers it routine. We discovered a race of beings who become more dangerous when facing impossible odds. We discovered that humans are not the prey, they are the predators. The scout fleet began preparing for departure as the main invasion force continued its approach to Earth. Within hours, they would receive the message that would save both species from a war that could only end in horror. As the Zephyri